My brother framed me to take over our family business, so I walked away silently, built my own empire, and now he works under my name. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and my family built a small business that was supposed to stay in our bloodline. My father started it from nothing, a tiny mechanical parts shop in the corner of an industrial district that smelled like oil, metal, and hard work. He used to say, "Son, if you treat every customer like their family, this business will outlive us both." Those words became the foundation of who I was. While most kids spent their summers on trips or sleeping in, I spent mine covered in grease, learning how every machine, every bolt, and every client relationship worked. My younger brother, Daniel, was the opposite of me. He had that kind of easy charm that made people forget his flaws. While I was tightening bolts and cleaning engines, he was cracking jokes with customers and convincing Dad to let him help with sales. I didn't mind at first. It felt like we were two halves of a good team. I was the hands-on builder. He was the talker. But even then, I could see the difference in how people treated us. Daniel had a way of making effort look effortless, and somehow that always earned him more praise. Still, I loved the business. It wasn't just a job, it was a legacy. I saw the pride in my father's eyes every time we completed a big order or fixed something no one else could. He'd pat my shoulder and say, "You've got the same hands I do?" I thought that meant everything was set, that one day Daniel and I would run this place side by side, just like Dad dreamed. But I didn't realize then that in a family like mine, loyalty could be twisted and love could be weaponized. The same legacy that built us was about to tear us apart. As we grew older, the cracks began to show, small at first, almost invisible, but they were there. My father used to say he loved us both equally, but sometimes equality sounded a lot like favoritism in disguise. Whenever Daniel showed up with a new idea, no matter how unrealistic, Dad would light up like it was pure genius. When I suggested something practical, it was always, "We'll think about it later, son." Later never came. Daniel had a way of turning every situation in his favor. He'd tell stories about saving a deal or charming a supplier, and Dad would beam with pride. Meanwhile, I was the one running quality checks, fixing supplier issues, and pulling all-nighters to meet deadlines. But those wins didn't sparkle. They were expected. I was reliable, not remarkable. It's strange how families reward charisma over consistency. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. As long as the business thrived, so did Dad's dream, and that was enough for me. But the comparisons got sharper. "Daniel's got vision," I overheard once. "You're good with tools, but he understands people." That one cut deep. It wasn't jealousy. It was the quiet ache of being unseen in your own story. Daniel started sliding into more meetings, charming clients that I'd built relationships with. He'd end those calls with, "Don't worry, I'll handle my brother." I didn't even realize he was planting seeds, that I was the serious, stubborn one while he was the friendly face. By the time I caught on, the image was already painted. I was the workhorse. Daniel was the golden child. And once the world believes a story like that, truth doesn't stand a chance, especially when your own family's telling it. Everything changed the year my father's health started to fail. It began with small things. He'd forget client names, lose track of paperwork, or pause mid-sentence like his mind had drifted somewhere else. At first I thought it was just exhaustion. He'd spent decades working himself to the bone. But when the doctor mentioned early signs of heart trouble, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Suddenly, I wasn't just a son. I was running the business while trying to hold my family together. I stepped up immediately, handling the shop floor, production schedules, and supplier contracts. Every day felt like juggling fire, but I didn't complain. Daniel, on the other hand, offered to help with the finances, claiming it would ease my burden. My father nodded proudly. He'd always said Daniel had a head for numbers. I should have questioned it right then, but I was too busy keeping things afloat to notice how easily Daniel was slipping into control. As Dad's health worsened, Mom grew distant too. She started leaning on Daniel emotionally, trusting his polished words and easy reassurances. "He's taking care of everything," she'd say. while I was still the one showing up before sunrise and leaving after midnight. Slowly, Daniel began calling the shots, deciding which clients to prioritize, which suppliers to drop. When I questioned him, he'd smirk and say, "Dad wanted me to make these calls. You should focus on operations." When my father passed away, it felt like the light went out in our world. The funeral was quiet, filled with familiar faces wearing the same strained expression, pity mixed with curiosity. But what I remember most wasn't the condolences. It was Daniel's expression during the will reading, a small, confident smirk when he heard we'd share equal ownership. It wasn't relief, it was calculation, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't just grieving a father. I was about to face a war I didn't know had already begun. After Dad's death, the business didn't just feel emptier, it felt colder. The workshop that once buzzed with purpose now carried a quiet tension, like everyone was waiting for something to snap. I tried to focus on keeping things steady. Orders still had to go out, employees needed guidance, and suppliers needed reassurance. But behind every task, I started noticing small inconsistencies, missing invoices, wrong totals, and double-charged clients. At first, I chalked it up to grief or clerical mistakes. We were all adjusting, after all, but then customers began calling. Angry, confused, demanding answers for payments they supposedly made twice. Every trail led back to financial records Daniel handled. When I asked him about it, he laughed it off. "You're being paranoid, man. It's just transitional chaos." He patted my shoulder like he was humoring a child. That's when I realized he wasn't denying responsibility. He was mocking my awareness of it. A few weeks later, I overheard two employees whispering near the break room. One said, "I heard he's been pocketing money since the old man died." They went silent the second they saw me, but the damage was done. Someone was spreading rumors, and Daniel's fingerprints were all over it. He'd built a narrative where I was sloppy, careless, maybe even corrupt. Then came the first betrayal that truly stung. A longtime client, Mr. Patel, called to say he'd be moving his account to Daniel's side of the business for smoother communication. I'd been handling that man's orders for 10 years. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye. Still, I kept quiet. I thought if I just worked harder, truth would speak for itself. But Daniel wasn't after truth. He was building a trap. And every time I ignored it, I walked a little closer to the edge. The breaking point came on a Monday morning that started like any other. I walked into the office, coffee in hand, ready to catch up on the weekend reports. But something felt off. Too quiet, too staged. When I stepped into the conference room, Daniel was already there, sitting beside our mother and the company accountant. On the table lay a thick folder labeled with my name in bold letters. My stomach sank before a word was said. Daniel leaned back, voice calm but dripping with false concern. "We've found some issues, brother. Funds missing from the main account, under your authorization." My first reaction was disbelief. "What are you talking about? I haven't touched those accounts." But the accountant flipped through the pages, showing transfer slips and electronic signatures that matched mine. My head spun. They were perfect forgeries, timed precisely to make me look like I'd been siphoning company money for months. I looked at Mom, desperate for her to see reason, but her face was pale, trembling. "How could you, after everything your father built?" she whispered. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder like some tragic hero. "Let's not make this harder for him, Mom. Maybe he just made mistakes." He knew exactly what he was doing, painting me as guilty but pitiable. It was manipulation at its finest. The board met that afternoon. My name was dragged through every rumor Daniel had planted over the past year. When I tried defending myself, it only sounded like excuses. In the end, they gave me a choice: step down quietly or face legal action that would destroy the family's reputation. I remember signing those resignation papers with shaking hands, the same ones that once built this company from the ground up. Daniel didn't even hide his smile. For him, it wasn't just victory. It was coronation. After that meeting, everything unraveled faster than I could process. By evening, my office keycard stopped working. Security escorted me out like I was some stranger caught trespassing. The same employees who used to greet me with smiles now avoided eye contact, pretending to be busy as I walked past. I remember standing in the parking lot, staring at the building I had practically grown up in, the one my father and I had built with our hands, and realizing I was no longer welcome inside it. I tried reaching out to Mom that night. She didn't answer my calls. When I finally went to her house, she opened the door halfway and said, "I don't want to discuss this anymore. Daniel showed me everything." Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't soften. In that moment, I knew I'd lost more than a career. I'd lost my family's trust, and with it, my entire identity. The weeks that followed were brutal. No one wanted to hire a man accused of embezzlement. Whispers followed me everywhere. Friends who once admired my work now gave me polite smiles laced with pity. I lived off what little savings I had, renting a small room above a noisy repair shop, the kind of place that smelled like rust and loneliness. Every night, I'd stare at my father's old toolbox, the one he left me before he passed, and wonder if he'd be ashamed. There were moments I almost gave in to the bitterness, moments I thought about exposing Daniel publicly. But deep down, I knew revenge built on anger doesn't last, so instead, I made myself a promise. I would rebuild, not to prove Daniel wrong, but to remind myself who I really was. He could keep the throne. I'd build a kingdom. When everything you've worked for is taken from you, you learn what truly matters. I left the city that held every ghost of my downfall and moved 3 hours away to a quiet industrial town where no one knew my name. I rented a rundown garage that still smelled of burnt oil and failure, but to me, it was freedom. It was the first place in months where I could breathe without hearing Daniel's voice in my head. The first few weeks were brutal. I fixed whatever came my way, busted generators, farm equipment, even old sewing machines. The pay was terrible, but the gratitude from my customers reminded me why I'd loved this kind of work in the first place. Word spread slowly. There's a guy in town who actually cares about what he fixes. It wasn't much, but it was honest. And after months of living under lies, honesty felt like gold. Some nights I'd stay late, building small prototypes my father once dreamed of developing. His notes were still with me, faded blueprints filled with scribbles and ideas he never got to finish. Those sketches became my blueprint for rebirth. I called the project Revolve, a name that meant motion, resilience, and starting again. There were times I almost gave up. The bills piled up and my hands bled from working nonstop. But then I'd look at that old toolbox again, the same one Dad gave me, and remind myself, he taught you to build from nothing once. Do it again. Slowly, Revolve stopped being a dream and became a real business. Clients came from nearby towns. Orders increased. I wasn't just fixing parts anymore. I was building something of my own. I didn't realize it then, but every sleepless night, every bruise, every ounce of silence I endured was shaping the empire I'd one day build, the one Daniel would never see coming. 2 years later, the small garage that once echoed with silence was now alive with noise, machines humming, tools clattering, and people calling me boss. Revolve Engineering had grown beyond what I ever imagined. I'd built a reputation for precision and reliability. Clients didn't just bring me business, they brought loyalty. My designs started attracting investors who saw potential beyond local repairs. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground again. Not as someone's son, not as someone's brother, but as my own man. One afternoon, during a meeting with a new supplier, I heard a name that nearly stopped my heartbeat: Daniel. The supplier mentioned he'd been working with my old family company, but was thinking of switching because they couldn't meet delivery timelines. "Their management's a mess," he said casually. "Someone named Daniel took over and he's bleeding clients left and right." I didn't say a word, but inside, a quiet satisfaction sparked. My brother had inherited everything, yet he couldn't keep it alive. He'd built his power on deceit, and now it was collapsing under the weight of his own lies. That night, I stared at the glowing Revolve sign outside my office and realized something. Revenge wasn't about shouting your success. It was about letting your existence become a reminder of their failure. Every bolt I tightened, every machine I shipped out, every client I won, it all whispered one truth. I didn't need to destroy him. He was doing that himself. Still, I wasn't ready to cross paths again. Not yet. I wanted to build something so untouchable, so undeniable that when Daniel finally saw my name again, he wouldn't see a rival. He'd see a ghost he could never bury, and fate, as it turned out, was already preparing that moment. It was almost poetic how karma decided to show up. 3 years after I left, I received an unexpected email from a familiar domain, my old family company. The message was short, formal, and desperate. We're seeking potential collaboration with Revolve Engineering to help restructure production operations. The name at the bottom? Daniel Cooper. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. My brother, who once dragged my name through the mud, was now asking for my company's help. I laughed quietly, not out of spite but disbelief. Life really did have a strange sense of balance. Later that week, I heard through mutual contacts that their business was falling apart. Clients had left after months of missed deadlines. Key suppliers had cut ties, and Daniel had apparently taken several risky loans to expand. The expansion failed. The debts piled up, and the once proud Cooper machinery was on the verge of collapse. Even Mom had stepped away from the board, unable to watch it crumble. When my assistant asked if we should respond, I said, "Schedule a meeting." I wanted to see it with my own eyes, to look at the man who'd built his success on my destruction. When Daniel walked into my office, he looked nothing like the polished, arrogant brother I once knew. His suit was wrinkled, his confidence cracked. "You've done well," he said, forcing a smile. "Maybe we can help each other out." I didn't reply right away. I just studied him. The same man who'd once stood over me with victory in his eyes, now swallowing his pride to stay afloat. For the first time in my life, I wasn't angry. I was calm, because I knew this wasn't revenge. It was gravity. Everything he'd thrown at me had finally come full circle. Daniel sat across from me, pitching partnership terms like he still had leverage. "If Revolve handles production," he said, "Cooper Machinery can bring in our existing clients. It'll be a win-win." He didn't realize that most of those clients were already mine. I leaned back, listening quietly as he tried to mask desperation with charm, the same charm that once convinced an entire family I was the problem. But this time, his words didn't carry power. They carried fear. I agreed to the partnership. But on paper, Revolve Engineering would handle all operations, inventory, and client accounts. "Just until you stabilize," I said. He nodded too quickly, eager to grab any lifeline. What he didn't notice was the fine print. My legal team had structured the deal to give Revolve controlling interest. Within 6 months, Cooper Machinery wasn't a partner. It was a subsidiary. And Daniel? He'd unknowingly sold me the very company he stole. The transition was quiet, almost surgical. I didn't fire him or humiliate him publicly. I kept him on payroll managing minor accounts, far from the spotlight he once craved. To the outside world, it looked like Revolve had simply expanded. But inside, I knew I'd reclaimed every piece of my father's legacy, brick by brick, contract by contract. Every time Daniel sent a report to me, I could see the shame behind his polite emails. He signed them, "Best regards, Daniel Cooper." And under that name, in the company header, was mine, Revolve Engineering. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd framed me once to take control of a business that wasn't truly his. Now he was signing paychecks that bore my name, not because I took revenge, but because I let time, truth, and patience do it for me. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Ordinary, quiet, unremarkable. Daniel barged into my office without knocking, clutching a folder with shaking hands. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "You think I wouldn't find out?" he snapped, slamming the folder on my desk. Inside were legal documents, ownership transfers, and merger contracts, all pointing to one truth. Revolve owned Cooper Machinery entirely. His signature sat at the bottom of every page. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. The same man who once stood over me, proud and victorious as he stripped me of everything I'd built. Now he was the one unraveling, realizing that his greed had signed away his own legacy. "You tricked me," he said, his voice cracking. "You wanted revenge this whole time. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. No, Daniel. You did this to yourself. I didn't forge documents. I didn't spread lies. I didn't frame anyone. You taught me that power built on deceit collapses under its own weight. I just built something honest, and you walked right into it. He sank into the chair opposite me, eyes wet with disbelief. You made me work for you. I nodded slowly. No, Daniel. I gave you a job. You made yourself my employee. For a long moment he said nothing, just sat there, staring at the documents that confirmed his downfall. There was no satisfaction in watching him break, just an eerie silence, the kind that follows after years of chaos. When he finally stood to leave, he whispered, "Dad would have been proud of you." I didn't respond, because I knew he was right, but it wasn't pride I felt. It was peace. For the first time since my father's death, I didn't feel like the wronged son or the betrayed brother. I felt free. It's been 5 years since that day, and sometimes I still drive past the old factory, the one that started it all. The sign that once read Cooper Machinery now carries a single word: Revolve. The paint is fresh, the machines are newer, but the spirit is the same. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about legacy, the kind built through perseverance, not manipulation. Every time I walk through those halls, I hear echoes of my father's voice reminding me, treat every customer like family. I finally understand what he meant. Daniel still works within the company, quietly, humbly. He manages a small division, handling repairs under my supervision. There's no bitterness left between us, just a distant understanding born from everything we lost. Sometimes I catch him watching me during meetings, like he's still trying to figure out how the tables turned. But I don't gloat. I don't remind him of the past. The silence between us says enough. Mom eventually reached out, apologizing for believing his lies. We don't talk much about the old days, but when she visited the new Revolve headquarters, tears filled her eyes. Your father would have been proud, she whispered, tracing her fingers over the company logo. This time, I believed her. Now, I mentor young entrepreneurs who remind me of myself, hungry, humble, and a little broken. I tell them, success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right, quietly. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is peace. As I lock up the office each night, the lights of Revolve glow across the city like a promise kept. My brother once tried to destroy me for control, but in the end, I built something far greater, an empire forged from silence, integrity, and time. And that silence, it still echoes.